If you and I got what we deserved, we'd be walking skeletons now, wouldn't we? But thank God the Lord provides for us not on the basis of how good we are, but on the basis of how good He is. And the Lord pours out His blessings upon us, not because we deserve them, but just because that's the kind of God He is. Amen. So they give David a sword, all right, but the only sword they have at the temple is Goliath's old sword. So David takes that behemoth, but I really don't know what good it's going to do him trying to lug that huge thing around. But he's got Goliath's sword. I guess it's some type of encouragement to him. Then notice in verse 7 that there was somebody else at church that day. For it tells us that there was a day detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg. Oh boy, good old Doeg. Anybody here named Doeg? Now why is that? You know, I know a lot of Davids, but I've never known of any parents who have ever named their son Doeg. You ever known any Doeg? Neither have I. And you know why? Because he was a no-good rat. Doeg was a spy for King Saul. He was the chief animal herder of Saul, and that means he took care of his mules and his donkeys. But Doeg also spies for Saul by sitting in the corner of the temple and just observing everything that's going on. And Doeg has got his little notebook out. He's writing everything down, if he can find his pen. And he's getting every juicy morsel written down. Because later on, he's going to have an opportunity to do a lot of damage to David with his little notebook. When he tells King Saul what his arch enemy has done. Now, isn't that just typical? Two people go to church, and they come with different motives. And they leave with different results. David goes to the temple and comes away with bread for the journey and sword for his battle. But Doeg goes to the temple and comes away with gossip in his notebook and murderous hate in his heart. Same church, same pastor, but two entirely different worshipers. Isn't that amazing? In verse 10, we find in this opening scene that David is still in this place of worship at Nob, but as a fugitive, you must always be on the move. You can never stay in any one place too long. So going on in verse 10, it says that he runs to a place called Gath. Now, the king of Gath was a man named Achish, King Achish. And you know, one more little piece of information. Gath was also the birthplace of a recently immortalized giant warrior and hometown hero by the name of Goliath. Now, you wouldn't think that with no TV or newspapers or magazines, how would those people know what David looked like? But somehow they did. Because in verse 11 they say, "Is this not David, the king of the land, and did not sing the women that came after him and danced, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? In other words, hey everybody, this is the dirty dog that killed our hometown hero Goliath. And verses 12 and 13 say, "And David laid up these words in his heart and was sore afraid of Achish the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands and scrabbled on the doors of the gate and let his spittle fall down upon his beard." In other words, David started acting like he was crazy. And to be quite honest with you, that's what happens to a lot of Christians sometimes. They get into enemy territory and they know they aren't where they really should be, and they start acting crazy. And backsliding Christians do some crazy stuff when they're out of God's will. And David is acting like he's crazy, and he's scrabbling on the walls and slobbering on his beard and just acting like a total nut job. I can't help but think of a friend of mine, Pastor Doug Martin. And this incident happened several years ago when he was teaching at one of our academies. He's got a big mouth and loves to laugh just like I do. And he says that he was in the men's room at Walmart. In one of the stalls, and a couple of teenagers came in, and he hears this one guy says, "Oh man, all the stalls are taken." And his friend says, "Oh, that's okay, use the handicap one." And Pastor Doug, like an idiot, says, "Yeah, because it's for the mentally handicapped too." And a couple of guys in the other stall started snickering when he said that. Well, that made those other guys so mad. And one of them says, "Okay, which one of you blank and blank said that?" And he was going down the line and looking in the door cracks at each one of the guys. And each guy would say, "Wasn't me, not me, wasn't me." And the guy came down to Pastor Doug's stall and kicked his door and said, "It was you, wasn't it? You blank, you blank." Pastor Doug said, amazingly, the guys in the other stalls by this time were long gone, boy. And soon the first guy was back out in front of his stall again, and he could see all 4 feet now standing out in front of his stall. And he said, "We're not leaving. We're waiting here for you, and you're a dead man." Pastor Doug said, man, he didn't know what to do. And he said he immediately thought of this situation with David here at Gath. And he said, "Lord, what am I to do?" So he said he reached up and he yanked one of those toilet seat covers out of the dispenser. And he said he punched the center out, and he said he put her over his head, put it around his neck, and he said he let the flap hang down in the front. And he said he came out of the stall acting real weird. And he said one guy said, "Man, let's get out of here. This guy's crazy." And he said, "I promise you that's an absolutely true story." So it worked with Pastor Doug Martin. It worked with David. I'm not saying that's always the way to handle the situation, but folks, sometimes it works. And Akey says, I have no need of madmen, that you have brought this fellow to play the madmen in my presence. Now that was the King James version. Oh, I'll tell you now the King John version. Here's my paraphrase. He's saying, I've got enough crazy people in my kingdom around here. I don't need this crazy guy too. Get him out of here.